Thanks for choosing to listen to this Late Night Linux Family podcast. We're only able to do this because of the people who support us. None of our shows are paywalled, but our Patreon supporters can get most episodes early and never hear any ads. Learn more at latenightlinux.com/support or support us by telling a friend or colleague about everything we do. 2.5 Admins, episode 302. I'm Joe.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Alan.
And here we are again. And before we get started, your customary Clara article plug, Alan, is which ZFS storage metrics matter for database performance?
Yeah, so in this one, we have identified which things you want to look at most closely in order to get the most out of your database and make sure that ZFS is helping rather than hurting.
Okay, and you've also got a webinar to plug.
Yes, so on June 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern, be joined by John from HexOS, and we'll be talking about AnyRAID, a new ZFS feature that will let you mix drives of different sizes and into a RAID Z volume.
Right, well, links to both of those in the show notes. There's been a bit of controversy with Microsoft recently. Specifically, in this case, we're talking about them making kind of threats to a security researcher because this researcher didn't do proper responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities.
Yeah, in this case, according to the researcher, they've been to the responsible disclosure process with Microsoft before and found their bugs marked as not important, so they wouldn't get the bug bounty, and then Microsoft kind of just silently fixed it without giving any credit, and they really didn't appreciate that. And so this time, they're like, I gave somebody at GitHub 1 hour's notice before I posted this, and kind of just went with it. And, Microsoft started making threats saying they might pursue criminal investigation against the person and so on.
Well, implying that at least.
Implying, yes. And then Krebs and others have done a little sleuthing. And it sounds like this particular researcher used to work for Microsoft, and there might be even more history there. But it's not clear if Microsoft knew that at the time either.
It is worth mentioning that this researcher goes by Nightmare Eclipse. And we actually talked about one of these vulnerabilities recently. That was the BitLocker, what we kind of assumed was a backdoor. We did get quite a lot of feedback about that.
So it turns out basically what's happening is when you're booting into the rescue mode, because Secure Boot is going to say this is still authorized code, it can access the TPM and basically pull out the key and decrypt it that way. And it apparently doesn't work if you actually have the PIN mode set up so that you have to enter something else instead of just having the key kind of available in the TPM. But it still feels a little dodgy, but maybe not as bad as it seems in that, the key material was in the TPM and it was legitimate to be able to decrypt it because you weren't breaking the Secure Boot covenant.
I have to admit, I may have misunderstood this story, because if I had understood that it was merely unlocking it with the TPM the same way that BitLocker does when you boot Windows normally, I probably wouldn't have said anything nasty about that at all. I mean, that is an issue with using BitLocker in that way, where the only security is the TPM state, is that the only thing it is actually preventing is somebody pulling the drive and putting it into a different machine and trying to access the data.
Or booting a non-secure boot operating system.
Yeah.
Like, I can't jack my FreeBSD USB stick in your machine and then read your hard drive.
Ultimately, we're kind of back to the pragmatic definition of cryptography. You use a key to turn data into garbage. And if that key is present, which it is in a machine that has the TPM, if the TPM is the only secret used for the encryption to begin with, well, then one way or another, yeah, you can get into that. I had honestly assumed that we were talking about it disabling the PIN functionality of BitLocker. Because if it's not disabling the PIN, personally, I don't really think it's that big of a deal.
Well, anyway, that aside, we've seen a lot of this lately, of people not doing proper responsible disclosure. I don't think Microsoft was right to start implying that there might be legal threats, but it is still an asshole move to do irresponsible disclosure, isn't it?
It's an asshole move to flag massive security issues as like medium priority, don't bother, blah, 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 and then just quietly fixing it, not crediting the researcher who brought it to your attention, much less paying them out under the terms of the bug bounty program.
Absolutely, but two wrongs don't make a right.
Two wrongs don't make an ideal outcome. However, frequently when one has been wronged, the best response is to wrong that entity right the hell back in a way that gets its attention. Is that ideal? No, but...
An eye for an eye, Jim. An eye for an eye and the whole world will be blind.
Except for the last guy. He'll still have one eye.
If you're significantly stronger than someone that you're trying to manage, then an eye for an eye does not make sense because you have the position of strength and authority, and you should find a gentler way to do that to come up with a better outcome. But when you are the weaker of the two parties in an adversarial situation, an eye for an eye is frankly rather generous because you're already starting out from the weaker position, you're being exploited, and some might argue that a head for an eye would be appropriate.
Yeah, it's kind of the difference between punching up and punching down.
Precisely. And in this case, we're talking about a large corporate entity with an indescribably massive revenue base, user base, you name it base, who is electing to stiff people who are submitting vulnerabilities under the guidelines of this bounty program that's intended to produce exactly that result, security researchers finding vulnerabilities so that you can fix them. The other side of this coin that we have to keep in mind is looking for vulnerabilities isn't illegal, and you don't have to sell them to the person or the entity who wrote that code in the first place. There are gray marketplaces out there that buy vulnerabilities, and they pay way the hell more than the bug bounty programs do, even when the bug bounty programs actually pay out the way that they're supposed to. So what Microsoft is really saying is, you know what? You're a sucker. You should have gone and sold that to the black hats, which would have been a way bigger dick move and way more irresponsible than public disclosure.
Agreed, but public irresponsible disclosure is still a dick move. And yeah, you can say, well, Microsoft acted like an arsehole, so I'm going to act like an arsehole back to them. But it's not Microsoft who you're acting like an arsehole to. It's Microsoft's users who are ultimately going to get pwned as a result of these.
No, I disagree. I don't think you're correct. The dick move against Microsoft's users would have been to sell that exploit for probably about $500,000 to somebody who's going to turn around and sell it to the Mossad or, to Russian crime gangs or you name it. You don't know because you sold it to a broker. That would have been the horrible, wrong dick move.
No, that would be an evil move. The public disclosure is the dick move.
The dick move was on Microsoft's part.
Disagree.
At least with public disclosure, you have as much notice as the bad guys, so you can either stop using VS Code temporarily or apply the setting change that mitigates the thing, or you have some ability to do something about it as opposed to just not knowing about it.
I just feel very strongly about this, that we have a process in place. And, Microsoft maybe is not the best example of this because we've seen it with open source projects that don't have a bug bounty, but the responsible thing to do is disclose it responsibly. And people are not doing that increasingly. And I just do not like this culture that has come around.
There's a lot of strain in that system as well. I think part of the reason why Microsoft is pushing back on so many bugs and trying to disqualify them from the bug bounty program is the level of slop they're being subjected to. I know that open source projects who have, volunteer security teams are also suffering from getting so many of these vulnerability reports, often powered by AI slop. And sometimes a lot of them are duplicates of each other because 5 different researchers use the same AI and analyze the same code and find the same 6 vulnerabilities and each report them separately and each want credit for it, that it can cause a lot of wasted time out of people that don't have very much time. And then that means the 10th person comes along and reports a vulnerability and doesn't get a reply quick enough, so they post it publicly because they felt like they were being ignored and it was just a capacity problem. So I think definitely there's room for improve on both sides. And I think there's a shift happening right now, and we haven't figured out the new way to deal with the volume of these vulnerabilities, where they went from an occasional thing that we deal with every once in a while to there's a flood is coming and it's not going to stop for a long time.
And I have a question for you, Joe. Let's assume that a hypothetical individual named, Joe Volnington is a skilled security researcher and reads about a bug bounty program from a massive global company that lays out the terms and conditions of finding bugs and comes to the conclusion that it's absolutely realistic that if I spend anywhere from let's say 1 to 4 weeks looking for vulnerabilities, I'll probably come away with somewhere in between, let's say $500,000 and $250,000 worth of bounties to be paid out to me. And you put in a month of work and you find vulnerabilities and you submit them and you're told, you know what? We're going to pretend that your vulnerabilities are actually out of scope. And we're going to use it as an excuse not to pay you anything. So you're saying that the proper response then is just, well, screw it?
No, the proper response is to kick up a massive fuss about it, but not to disclose the vulnerabilities until they're patched. Blog about it, write into the register, ask technical.
Sure, but is the register going to pick it up if you don't have the vulnerability there?
Well, you could responsibly disclose it to the register or Ars Technica.
If you can get them interested, which I think is more of an uphill battle than you realize.
I agree that it's harder than I'm making it out to be, but it's not impossible.
It's not entirely impossible, but there's a strict publishing schedule at all of the outlets you've mentioned, one of which I rather notoriously worked for several years. And I'm telling you right now, it's a big ask to say, hey, I want you to independently verify this private vulnerability that there's nothing out there showing and yada, yada, and figure out all that and then write a story around it versus you just drop that shit. You disclose it and then the outlets will cover it. But if it's just like this thing that you're holding close to your chest, your odds aren't great.
I suppose it's naive of me then to believe that people would spend that time working on something and then not get paid for it and then not just say, well, fuck you and drop it then. I suppose it's a hopeful view of the world that is just naive.
It is. And honestly, my big objection is just that I don't think it's appropriate to focus on the researcher because you're ignoring Goliath while you complain about David. And the fact of the matter is, Goliath invited David to that contest and, then tried to cheat on every possible rule. And, maybe we don't gripe that Goliath got a rock to the forehead for his troubles at that point. Even if Goliath fell on somebody that was there to watch the show, again, I don't think David is the one that you really blame for that.
All right, more Microsoft stuff then. This time they're intentionally bricking all Office for Mac 2019 and 2021 installations. So essentially what's happening is people bought a perpetual license to use Office 2019 or 2021 on their Mac or iPhone, and now it's going to stop working in a read-only mode. You can't edit the documents, you can't save them. This is not altogether unexpected, but still a dick move.
This is an enormous dick move, without a doubt. And really, it's just another example of there is no such thing as a perpetual license to a subscription product. Now, granted, Office hasn't always been a subscription product, but as soon as Microsoft went Office 365 and started heavily promoting that and trying really hard to deprecate the just, go down to the big box store and buy a copy of Office, you knew the writing was on the wall. It always is.
I think even if they didn't have a subscription product, they probably would still be doing this to get you to buy the version with this year's date on it. Office has kind of always been that way. It was just in the past, it was easy to say, well, it doesn't support your version of Windows with the old version anymore. But Windows doesn't evolve quite as fast now.
I don't think Microsoft would have had the balls to brick it if it was still a case of like the normal model is you buy Office every few years. I think if they were going to do that, they would have been doing that, and they never did before. This is really new since they went subscription, but we see this happen over and over again. Once a company gets addicted to that regular, when it's coming in, it's easy to get, it's hard to lose that subscription revenue, they lose all appetite for maintaining the things that like you get a perpetual license for.
But at the same time, from the way this is worded, it sounds like this has been built in since the beginning. It's basically a certificate will expire on July 13th, 2026, and that will make those versions fall back to this read-only mode. It's not like a software update. It's something that sounds like has been baked into the software for a long time.
It's like a dead man's switch almost.
Yeah, and it might be that this has been in there dormant in the software since before 2019 when it came out, that when this license validation certificate expires, you go read-only, and they could set this up well ahead of time. But to Jim's point, I think the most galling thing is Microsoft suggesting, well, you could just buy a new copy of Office 2024 offline.
Because we definitely won't do this again or anything.
Because again, I'm sure there's a certificate that depends on that will expire, and they're just not saying when.
I mean, really, Microsoft in being shower of bastards, shocker, ultimately.
Right. And it's like, the Office 2019 went out of support in October of 2023, and the certificate didn't expire until 2026. So technically, they give you a lot more time than they ever said they were going to.
Yeah, but out of support means no security fixes and stuff, which is sort of fair enough if that's what was agreed to up front.
I think, Alan, you and Joe might have been mischaracterizing the way this works a little bit. We don't have access to real technical documentation, but I'm looking on learn.microsoft.com about the certificate expiration right now. And this is the way that I had originally read this story and continue to after looking it up on Microsoft's site. What I'm seeing is that the certificate that we're talking about is the one that's generated to validate your registration, your license. When you have to go online to register your copy of Office, you get a signed certificate, and that certificate will expire after a few years. What we're seeing here is not, we've decided you're going to go read-only when that expires. It's to use the product at all, you're going to have to install this update that will stop looking for a license, but will put you in read-only mode. I may be misinterpreting it, but that's what I'm seeing.
Right, but either way, the mechanism isn't that important, right? What's important is it will stop working.
Well, it's important in the sense that, we were talking before about, well, this was always built in, and I don't think that's accurate. I think the certificate expiration was accurate because they're only going to give you so many years before they check in again to see, Microsoft is always thinking you're a pirate in the back of their head, and they're not afraid to tell you they think you're a pirate. I think that's what that was about, but that's being hijacked now as a convenient way to force people onto this read-only update.
So it's actually worse then than we thought.
Well, maybe just that they didn't have this plan back in 2019.
Yeah, exactly.
Is Jim's point that maybe I oversold that.
Yeah, that's my whole point. Is just I don't think this was always the plan or this was always built in. I think they have decided now that Office 365 is the way everybody should be using Office, including Mac users, and this is a convenient way to force that.
You know what's never stopped working for me? LibreOffice.
I also personally love the use of LibreOffice when I need an Office suite. I personally don't have any significant issues with file conversions back and forth and, working with people using Microsoft Office. I also have enough experience in the IT industry to know that normal people have significantly more difficulty with that. And it's unfortunately not practical to just say, well, every Tom, Dick, and Harry should just install LibreOffice instead of Microsoft Office and everything will be great.
Oh, absolutely. But it doesn't stop me being less smug about it.
Fair.
Well, more Microsoft news. Introducing Microsoft Scout, your always-on personal agent. And this is a new category of agents that they're calling autopilots.
And it's based on OpenClaw, so there's no problems buried under there.
I mean, I was reading this just almost mouth agape, like, you're going to give this agent access to all of your data and all of your accounts.
Not just one, many of these agents, all working independently on your behalf, which I read as doing it in your name without your knowledge.
I think if I were to take the devil's advocate position on this one, it would be that Microsoft is well aware that people are already unleashing OpenClaw on their Office 365 installations. And by God, if they're going to do it, well, Microsoft wants them to do it with Microsoft's own version.
Yeah, so they can charge you ClawPilot tokens for it or something, right?
Why let somebody else get the money for the tokens when they could get it?
Yeah, or I don't know if this is actually going to be more of something you run locally on your new NVIDIA Microsoft box.
Yeah.
But I know some people who would want something like this, but I know a lot of people that would be very disgusted by having something that's on their machine.
Well, considering that this is Microsoft, rolling it out officially, I think that it's accurate to say there are going to be a lot of people who absolutely hate this, who are immediately required to use it by their employer.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be, you have to have antivirus and endpoint protection, blah, 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 forced upon you. Now it's going to be this shit forced upon you when you get a new job.
That is actually a really excellent comparison. I have seen so many endpoint protection setups that are absolutely toxic. They do not make your machine a single iota safer, and they just absolutely trash performance and reliability. But you let the wrong person with a brass nameplate, get a bug in their ear, and next thing you know, the company is required to have this everywhere, all desktops, all servers, all everything, all the time. And this kind of is more of the same in a way, but worse.
I mean, this is just madness, isn't it?
What if you not only asked your antivirus application to read every single email that you required or sent, but you also wanted it to be able to take notes and give you the gist?
And draft replies.
And send replies. And schedule things on your calendar and remove things from your calendar.
And edit files and move files around, potentially. Delete files, potentially.
Oh, delete entire drives, as we have seen with OpenClaw. It's going to be great. No downsides. Just going to go ahead and call it right now. No data is unexpectedly going to disappear or be destroyed or mangled or modified in an unpleasant way on Azure or within Intra at all as a result of this. It's just not going to happen. This is going to be great.
You know what I was thinking reading this? I was thinking this is like the perfect use case for ZFS on the back end, because when these agents fuck up and delete all your shit, no problem, we'll just roll back the ZFS snapshot.
As long as you don't give the agents access to the freaking ZFS tools, sure.
Yeah, they're going deleting snapshots to free up space.
I mean, that's the class of error this kind of agent would absolutely make in a heartbeat. It just immediately destroy your entire archive depth of snapshots in order to reclaim little space.
But suddenly this all makes a lot more sense when you think all the way back to Microsoft Agents. Does anybody remember Microsoft Agents for like Windows 98? It started with Clippy, but then they had the other ones like the parrots and so on, and they'd talk to you and just annoy you and so on. You're going to have a whole bunch of those running around your screen being like, oh, you got an email, let me just attach something to it and reply for you. Imagine 4 of those running around your desktop just moving shit on you and replying to your emails. It'll be great.
Give Clippy teeth. Great.
Yeah. Instead of it looks like you're writing a letter, it's like, oh, it looks like you're writing a letter. Here, I rewrote it for you. And it's like, this isn't even to the same person anymore. Yeah, but I just guessed what you wanted.
It looks like you've written letters in the past, so I decided I'd write one and send it, for you, to be helpful. I think my favorite, and favorite is very much in scare quotes, thing about these agents is how frequently the people that use them, tell them to write blog posts as a way of monitoring them. And they just read the agent's blog. There's no room for ambiguity or, anything to slip through the cracks there. Absolutely. Ask this thing to write you short stories. It'll be great.
Let's do some free consulting then. But first, just a quick thank you to everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. If you want to join those people, you can go to 2.5admins.com/support. And remember that for various amounts on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed of either just this show or all the shows in the Late Night Linux family. And if you want to send in your questions for Jim and Alan or your feedback, you can email show@2.5admins.com. Another perk of being a patron is you get to skip the queue, which is what Braden has done. I would love to know your thoughts on systems administrators keeping up with the latest technology. I started in a help desk role my sophomore year of university, and due to a sudden departure by one of my company's sysadmins, I went part-time school and went full-time as a sysadmin in my junior year. It was trial by fire, but I learned way more through that experience than I ever did at university. Because my company is entirely private cloud, I mostly have experience with VMware and virtual machines, and virtually none with the major cloud providers. This means little experience with Kubernetes, Lambda functions, infrastructure as code, etc. I see some of this as beneficial as I can help SMBs such as my own company who are not cloud first, but I wonder if it is hurting me in the long term that I am not familiar with the newer technologies. Sounds like this question should have come to Hybrid Cloud Show to me, but okay, you two have a go at it.
Yeah, I would say it depends on, what your goals are for your own career to a large degree. Do you want to work with companies that are public cloud first, mostly hosting their stuff in AWS or Google Cloud or what have you? Or do you prefer to stay, you can be cloud native and be, locally hosted on premise. And to that degree, yeah, absolutely. If you feel like you don't have as much experience in all the things as you'd like to, get some Kubernetes experience. Spin yourself up a home lab or, a development lab at work if they give you the resources there. You don't necessarily have to have a ton of physical hardware because the goal is to learn how it works and whether it's going to be beneficial for you as a workflow, whether you really gel with it. So it doesn't have to be super high performance. And that means, honestly, you can do it in a single box. You can set up 3 VMs and turn those 3 virtual machines into a baby Kubernetes cloud. And then you can start deploying jobs on it and figuring out, like, do I like this workflow? Does this work for me? Is this something I would want to spin up on 10 or 20, actual physical machines in a rack or two if I had that option?
Yeah, and this is where the kind of thing of having enough experience with it to know kind of what it's good at and what it's not, or just like what it was meant for, can help you better judge when it's time to consider doing that versus not. Because the appeal of private cloud over just servers with maybe VMware is that you're supposed to get some of those features and that kind of elasticity and the ability to just stand up new infrastructure when you need it without manually going and installing a bunch of new servers. And having that flexibility can be very valuable, but experience is the only way to really be able to ingrain those kind of pros and cons. And so, as Jim said, home lab or work lab and get a little experience with some of that stuff will help you know, is this applicable to what I'm trying to do or not? Would this be a good fit for the kinds of things we do or the way we like to organize our IT or not? And then from there, you can decide whether you want to learn a whole lot about a Kubernetes or just enough to know that that's not the right answer for what you're doing right now. But the next project that comes up, you'll be like, Kubernetes might actually be worth considering here because I have that little bit of experience with it.
The infrastructure as code bit, though, I think that is not necessarily essential, but like very important, and it will be more and more important going forward. So that doesn't necessarily mean you're writing code to spin up AWS instances. That can be controlling boxes on your company's LAN. But having everything as kind of a GitOps infrastructure as code way of doing things, kind of mindset, I think that is definitely worth learning.
Yeah, and there's different implementations of it, but the general concept is it's the recipe to just go and recreate your whole infrastructure. So if everything got burned down, it's like these kind of descriptive, declarative set of instructions would build the same thing back up. And that means when you want to make a change, you can just change the recipe a little bit and it'll figure out what the difference is and stand it up. It's an extension of the kind of configuration management stuff you have out of like Ansible or Puppet or whatever, just going further, like configuring the switches and the routers and all that as well.
Whether you're talking about Kubernetes or even the larger VM infrastructure, applications like, OpenStack or what have you, how deep you get into that is going to depend in large part on what size of a team do you want to work with. Notice I'm talking about the size of the team, of the actual IT folks, not the size of the user base or how complex the job is, but the size of the team. Because that's when something like Kubernetes or OpenShift, OpenStack, that's when that really shines. Because here's the negative way of looking at it. What these technologies really are is it's kind of a slop farm. It's when you say, look, I have more hardware resources than I have the skull sweat to think about the most efficient way to organize those resources. So I would prefer to just let the computer throw the thing on wherever it thinks the most sensible place for the thing to be is, and that will save me some of my most treasured resource, which is my own skull sweat, my own time and attention. So this makes sense when you have a huge team with a bunch of people who aren't always going to make the same decisions for optimizing something, and it gets chaotic and you're not sure who's doing what when. Well, now it makes a lot of sense to say, look, we've got lots of people, we've got lots of resources. Let's let an algorithm put all those things together in a way that makes a reasonable amount of sense. But if you're not trying to get into a large team, you're basically just leaving performance on the table and requiring extra hardware by using these kinds of management algorithms. Again, whether you're talking about Kubernetes or OpenStack, whether you're talking about containers or virtual machines, either way, you're saying, I'm retiring from the managing hardware business and letting the computer do it not as well, but without me having to worry about it.
Well, I think scale is a big factor as well. Like you said, it depends on the size of your team, but the size of your user base is kind of important, because are you looking after an office of 50 people, or are you deploying infrastructure for a massive multinational company? Well, if you are looking at, hundreds of thousands to millions of users, it's not realistic to be managing every server manually, is it?
That gets a little more complicated, and arguably, yes, what you're saying can make sense. But in most of the cases where I see something like Kubernetes or, one of the big, we'll figure out what host to put your VM on kind of stacks, the issue isn't really one of like elastic automated scaling, like you would read about in one of the AWS's sales pitches. Like, oh my God, you can go from serving 10 people today to 10,000 people tomorrow. You just write your routine to spin up extra hosts for application servers and load balancers and whatever as you need it. Yes, that's a thing you can do, and there is such a thing as a workload that might benefit from that. Except you're back into kind of weird territory then, because how many people really have a workload that changes by an order of magnitude from one day to the next? And out of those people, how many can realistically find something useful to do with the extra capacity on the slow days? If you've only got one tightly defined mission and one fairly small set of IT folks who are, shepherding that mission along, the odds that something like this sort of elastic put it wherever situation are really going to be helpful, they get pretty slim to none in my experience.
Well, I wasn't joking when I said you should ask the Hybrid Cloud Show guys this question, because I think you're going to get quite a different answer from them.
I second that. You absolutely should ask them. The thing that I would say is, yes, you definitely should have asked them, but it was a good idea also to ask us. Yeah,
because I think part of this is, is Kubernetes the right answer comes down to kind of a second level of the pets versus cattle, right? To Jim's point, are you managing servers and saying, all right, this server does these things and this server does those things? Or are you being like, here's all my servers, here's some workloads. Other people who aren't going to ask IT are going to just click things and spin up extra workloads. Do some developers need an extra test lab or a CI environment and stuff? And it just figures out where to put stuff. It's not going to be optimal, but it'll save me doing the work. It can make sense. But other times where you'd be like, I know what will actually work better and let us do this with fewer machines, maybe still doing that with a person makes more sense. And knowing both of the options, even if you've not spent all your time learning Kubernetes, can be useful to know when it's time to start looking at the alternatives.
Right, well, we'd better get out of here then. Remember, show@2.5admins.com if you want to send any questions or your feedback. You can find me at joelrest.com/mastodon.
You can find me at mercenariesysadmin.com.
And you can find me at alanjude.com.
We'll see you next week.